So thank you everybody for coming. Today I'm going to give a talk which is actually to give an introduction to a course I will be offering online. And the talk is about a 6th century monk who wrote, well, he supposedly wrote, it's still questionable, probably the most famous poem in the Chan tradition, and it came out of China. So if you can imagine, written somewhere in the 500s, I think it was 580 something, that a poem is still existing and is the most popular and the most translated poem, not only poem but text in all of Mahayana and Chan traditions. So it is something very widely read, widely reflected on, for very good reasons. So I want to share a little bit of this today, and just in offering an introduction to what I'll be teaching over a 6-week online course. So the story goes, like in the Chinese lineage, we have this history of great Zen teachers or Chan masters who came from Bodhidharma, who was an Indian who went to China, and he had to reflect on how would Buddhism grow in China. And it is said that he sat for 9 years facing a wall till he had this great realization. So we're talking here about the 3rd patriarch after Bodhidharma, and his name was Sheng Ts'an. He was a layman at the time that he met his teacher, Daiso Hakui, and he was also very sick with what they believe was leprosy at the time. So he comes across this teacher, or he goes to meet this teacher, and he says, I have a great illness, I'm riddled with illness. Can you please help me overcome the sins of my past and absolve my illness? And the great Daiso Hakui says, bring me your illness, bring me your sins, and I will heal your illness. Bring me your sins. It seems a common thread that a student goes to a teacher with a problem, and the teacher, through a dialogue, helps to resolve the issues. And so Sheng Ts'an pauses a long time and he thinks about it and he scans his body, but he cannot find his sins. He cannot find the source of his evil doing, his wrong actions. They occur, but he cannot bring it to the master to say, well, here's my sin. Here's the source of my sin. This is the reason why. And Hakui looks at him and said, well, I have resolved this problem for you. You no longer have this sin. And in this moment, there is a shift in the mind of Sheng Ts'an. And in his mind, he instantly has this great sense of peace and faith rise in his heart. And Hakui says to him, now you should shave your head and become a Buddhist, study the Dharma, find community, find a Sangha. And Hakui is said, and Sheng Ts'an is said to say, well, I have found the Sangha in you. But, who is the Buddha and what is the Dharma? And Hakui says, the Buddha is your mind. The Dharma is your mind. This is what you need to find. This is what you need to discover. So it was at a time that there was persecution beginning in China, there was word out that Buddhists would be persecuted with the change of the king. And the two monks go off and live in the forest, in the mountains. And it's said that Sheng Ts'an lived there for 24 years till he came down and found connected with the next great patriarch. And during this time, he supposedly has written this poem, Shi Xing Ming. And Shi Xing Ming was written 585, I think it was. And I've taken a translation which is called Faith in the Heart. Heart and mind in Chinese, or the Chinese character, but in Chinese language, is the same. If you look at heart, it's Xin. If you look at mind, it's Xin, and it's written in the same way. But the mind here is the vast, complete mind of the Buddha. And the heart here is the, again, vast and complete, compassionate heart mind of the Buddha. So we have to keep this in perspective. I've chosen, I studied this back in about 1980, 81, when I first came across it, this little tiny book here. And I chose the title, Trust in the Heart, for good reason. Most of the translations is faith in mind, trust in mind, leaning towards the mind as, or the big mind as the mind that we need to come to realize. But I feel it is really, at this time, this need to develop this deep faith, this deep trust in our heart. Trust is a very interesting word. Even faith in Buddhism can be miscued in just a dogmatic belief, or in something that we need to, totally have faith in what we hear, or faith in the teacher, without any evaluating, or without any actually investigating. But here it is something much greater, and it's something that is within us all. Without faith, you are not sitting here in front of me. Without trust in what I might be sharing with you is going to inspire you in some way to deepen your practice, you are not sitting here in front of me. You are not practicing the Dharma. You're not investigating and looking further in how to liberate yourselves. So it is not a blind ideology of Buddhism. However, the faith mind in itself is fundamentally inherent in all, well, they say sentient beings, or living beings. So it's fundamentally inherent within us. If we capsulate that thought within the heart mind, or the heart, the trust in the heart, the believing in the heart, the knowing the heart, then this has a great capacity to instill in us a path to walk towards liberation. It begins with a line: the great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences. The great way is not difficult for those who do not choose and reject. Is another way of saying that line. These lines, or epigraphs they call them, are two little lines that are so complete within the line itself, or within the two lines. They give you a picture of what we are trying to understand here. if you visualize or you picture the great, vast way, the great, perfect, vast space where nothing is lacking and nothing is in excess, you know, what is there to grasp? What is there to differentiate? So this is a poem about how to meditate, how to investigate the mind in meditation. It is a poem about liberation. So many of you here meditate on a regular basis, have sat in retreats. And you know how hard it is. But we have moments of experiencing this wide open, spacious, still mind. And that's because it is always there. If it wasn't there, we wouldn't be able to enter it. We wouldn't be able to experience it as the Buddha experienced it. I mean, it is even said that there is nothing, basically, that differentiates us to the Buddha, fundamentally, other than the Buddha recognized that in his own complete experience of it. For us, we have glimpses. We touch on it. Moments of that deep peace, that deep trust. And when we have that, something shifts, something changes in us. And we're deeply inspired. The way is not perfect. Like vast space where nothing is lacking and nothing is in excess. That is a state of stillness, of deep acceptance. So the first line is, we suddenly enter into this heart of reality. Nothing in excess. What is there to grasp if there's nothing in excess? What is it we're longing for? What is it we're hoping should be different? And actually, if you can experience from your meditation as you enter out of those states of stillness and peace into your life, and you carry it in a seamless way from this moment to the next, you're not thinking about what you need to be going to. You're not thinking about what isn't working here. You're in the moment of it unfolding in a way of relating and engaging and fully experiencing and learning from that moment. Choosing to accept or reject is what we do when we cannot see the pure nature. We cannot see this heart of acceptance fully. You know, we want, most days we wake up with a list of wants. We write down our list, our goals for the day. It sets us off in this pattern of, well, I want to get this done by this time, and I've got to call this person by this time. They better be there, because that's the only time I can talk to them. You know, we have this way, a behavior, this habit of thinking. We all have it. So the unpacking of this is to say, well, this is what we do. What's wrong with it? It's not so much what's wrong with it, is what can we learn out of these habits? How can we unpack it in a way that makes our life a little bit more at ease, not diseased, at ease, a little bit more free, a little bit more flowing. Most enlightenment experiences in the Zen tradition, I mean, for the Buddha, it was, he said a sentence, a word, and people were in his presence liberated. Well, it got to usually, it wasn't so quick, so simple, except perhaps in the Zen tradition where there was a transmission, we say a transmission of mind. There was a transmission, a shift from the old way of thinking into a new way. When we sometimes go back to these source materials, so you, as Theravadan Buddhist, you go back into the texts of the Buddha, the middle-length sayings, the various teachings of the Buddha. And this is to constantly engage us in the ideas that surround the Dhamma, but fundamentally to inspire us, to bring faith into us, to open the heart to new ways of thinking and being. But it is not about turning away. It's actually about distilling the way. When we enter into something, we're distilling an experience in that thing. That becomes deeply connected to who we are in that moment. It becomes part of the experience. I sort of become the thing becomes me, the situation becomes something that I'm identifying with. But in that experience, the two extremes fall away. The separate sense of self falls away here as to the object, as something solid, fixed, with an identity. It's never solid, it's never fixed. There's never an identity there. But we have that belief. You're looking at me, you identifying with this. Every one of you have a different sort of identification going on here. Me as the object, yourselves as the subject, or vice versa. We've created in our minds a story. You're creating a story as I'm talking. But it's not the thing. It's not the reality. It says, if you wish to move, this is another stanza, another epigraph, if you wish to move in the one way, do not even dislike the world of the senses and ideas. So it's not telling us to turn away from anything. We have the senses. Ideas are going to continue to flow. They're just part of the mental scandals that happen, you know. They're part of the experience of having this physical, mental life that we're absorbed in. So we're not turning away from it in the sense of a like or a dislike. We are turning into it. It's like the mind observing the mind, the heart observing the experience of the heart. And I'm not just talking again about the emotions of the heart, which come under the likes and dislikes and the feelings. These fluctuate so quickly we can't really often know how to work with them. But I do know that when I'm with people, and I've had a lot of people come recently who have had very traumatic experiences in their life, and they're stuck in them. They've had them from a very young age. They repeat themselves in patterns. They tell themselves the story over again, and they tell others the story over and again. And yet they are stuck in that view, the emotional, psychological view of who they are, as if they're that fixed body of pain. But what I find shifts that is when I enter into it through listening, not through an opinionating what's going on, not through a judgment of what's going on, but when I'm present enough, still enough in myself to be that, whatever that is, in the sense of whatever's coming to me from that person, something shifts. Because there's nothing, I mentioned this to someone in this last week. I was a bit grumpy with my handyman overcutting all the, he tends to cut the camellias and the rhododendrons so we see the trunks and all the flowers are up in the sky, you know, if we get any more flowers in the next season. And it's a bit of a habit he has. So I was complaining about this the other day, and he didn't say anything. He didn't apologize. He didn't judge my judgment. It was like talking to the wind. He, for me, in this reverse moment, became the listener, accepting his view, his way of doing things, not judging himself, not putting himself down, and not buying into my story, even though it's my property, well, not my property, but our property. So after about 5 minutes of this, and I'm recognizing this shift, I'm walking in front, and I said, well, maybe next time when we are cutting trees, you know, we can have a conversation. And in a very quiet voice, which as if was talking to myself, I said, yes, people do have different views about how to garden. And the only word he said, the only thing he said was, yes, that's true. He's my Zen teacher. He's the most, I always believe that whatever the karma between us, he's been coming ever since I arrived in Kinglake. And he's done renovations, he's used to fix the car, he does the gardening. So he's actually amongst our community the most popular person on at the Son Centre, because he's so simple and so much equanimity. So I reviewed this last night when I was putting this together, or yesterday. I was reviewing this quality in him, which is based in that equanimity and the capacity to be with whatever, engage in whatever. If I ask for something, we have more than 2 words about it. He says, anything you like, Ji Kwang. That's the end of it. Anything you like. In that tone that goes, right. Anyway, so coming back to this line, if you wish to move in the one way, do not dislike even the world of the senses. So it's not about the liking and disliking. It is about entering into this sense world. And I have remembered when I've been with teachers who I have been instantly stilled. I don't even remember what I went to talk about, because in Korea when you go to see a teacher you have to go and have something to talk about, and it should be something quite profound in a way in regard to your practice, or very important in regard to your practice. But quite often when I've been with a teacher who has this depth of equanimity and has this illumination, this very bright mind, that the thoughts I hold or the views I hold fall away. We both sit in this spacious, great way, you might say, this spacious openness, where it's very engaging. Every little thing, whether he's making a cup of tea or she's making a cup of tea, which is often what happens when you enter to have a conversation with a teacher, or a tea has been offered, every little moment is vibrating through you. And it's always reminded me from that line, that very first line, the great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences. When all the loves and hates and all the wants and things fall away, we are there 100%. But you will find in your workplace, this happens. Especially people who are working with the suffering of others. They are there fully. If a doctor's not there fully with his patient, things don't go right. If he's not working in an open, communicative space with those who are working with him or her, working with her, things don't go right. So the level of concentration is very important, as we discover in meditation. Without the concentration, we are just in the sea of this and that. We're just floundering, trying not to drown in the sea of this and that. It points to opening up an inquiry and an investigation, anew and anew in each moment. With the senses, when they're wide open, it is allowing the present situation to be softened. When we're actually really experiencing an interrelational presence with whatever it is we're engaging in, there is a softening, because there is underneath it, there is an unknowing. Every moment we don't really know. We're just resolving little problems. We're resolving how to do. We're inquiring on how to do it or what it is, particularly what it is. My personal koan or hwadu is called, what is this? What is this, moment to moment? What is this thing unfolding? What is it telling me? What is it saying? But we're allowing that situation to soften with a more compassionate heart. Without bringing the heart into it, things become a little bit brittle, a bit fixated, a bit opinionated. When we come into it with a gentleness, with a softening of the heart, with compassion, then we are curious, we are kind, we are loving. Our presence is loving. The situation is loving back. And the judgments and justifications and the wants tend to be minimalized. Choosing over what I like and I dislike in a daily way, I think has been somewhat refined, because I have to do many things in my day. And this last 6 weeks have had a lot of visitors, so I've had to prepare and engage with a lot of visitors. And doing things online and conversations and so forth. But I try not to put a valuation. I tend to wake up in the morning and I have a little habit or pattern. I look at the weather, I look at the day. Does gardens need to be watered? Do birds need a little seed? I have a pattern of reflecting on what needs to be done when. This is over many years. You all have these habits you have refined over many years. But each of them in the moment is a wonderful practice. It's a wonderful interrelational, respectful practice. So what I do and when I do it, time becomes of essence. I often find when we have our committee meetings, there's this thing from some people, it has to be this long. I'm very busy. We can't go over the time. I come in with this pressure to get through the agenda of a meeting, and everyone's very relieved if I get it done in an hour. Now, I've heard the meetings in the BSV go for 5 hours, so just letting a few committee members who may be aware of that. All the rest of what we don't get done in the meeting, I have to get done myself, quietly on my own. So I don't think people really realise the amount that any one of us have to do in a day. No one else can really understand that. But we can learn through our practice to know what is important, what are priorities, without a whole day of picking and choosing. Now, I'm just talking really here about the very first stanza, because I will explain, if any of you have interest, this in far more detail as we go through this long verse over the 6-week course. And another thing is to become, another stanza is to become serene in the oneness of things. So we all know that when we meditate and this oneness, the stillness envelops into a oneness of things, this lack of disconnection, this full interrelational situation, then a sense of being that. Great Indian sage says, I am that. I am that. He's talking about the oneness. There's not a separation there. That, I am this. This. But when we cling to our views, our aversions, our entanglements, our erroneous thoughts and dreams, that gets further and further away. You become very distant in this moment. So, learning to grow in trust and in faith, the heart-mind is capable of responding to anything in an appropriate way. The Buddha always had the appropriate teachings for that person in that moment. They probably weren't even repeated. When you go through the dialogue, this happened, he would, through his meditation, connect with someone who needed help that day. I've often thought about the young weaver and the Buddha. She appeared to him in his meditation, his early morning meditation. He had different times throughout the night and day. He had different experience of teaching in realms and teaching people. But he would see early in the morning who it was he was connected with. And he could see this young girl who was a weaver was not going to live out the day. So he went to visit her. And he asked, have you finished your weaving for the day? Have you finished the cloth you're weaving? Have you completed your work? Yes, she said. And then I've forgotten the exact response, but the response was in good. You have finished what you need to do. Last year, I've mentioned this before, one of my brother monks passed away very suddenly from aneurysm. And we're having his first death ceremony, so I'll be going to Korea in April. But I said, I was talking to another brother monk, and I said, he was always in such a hurry to get everything done yesterday. You know, so he was planning, he was always working at such a pace for the community. Even when he was a hermit, he was growing vegetables for the community, seeing so many visitors, planning various things for the building and the temple, even before he became the master. But he didn't stop as the master. He still did all the things he had to do as a master, but continued, in a way, grasping to all the things he had done in the past. So his passing, I think, was very, very sad, but it was at the same time understood by the monks, you know. But I saw it in another way. I saw it like this little girl whose life, karma in this life, had come to an end because she had finished what it was she had to do. And I think had he lived longer, there would have been this habit of continuing to have to always give out and give out and give out. So there needs to be this balance, this equanimity, this stability, fundamental stability for faith and trust in the heart. Trust that the heart knows what to do, how to do it, when to do it. Not always pushing the body and mind to do things in the way we want them to happen. So also another thing really important, trust implies truthfulness. Without truthfulness, it is very hard for trust to be there. A truthful mind is not separate from reality and what's going on around us. It's not reliant on another's opinion or view. A truthful heart is not missing something. It has no false values. It has no expectations. It is just a pure heart. To deny the things of the reality of things is to miss their reality. So we have to accept what is arising with us as the practice. To assert the emptiness of things is also to miss their reality. Now, emptiness became, for many practitioners, a nihilistic sort of, went in a nihilistic way. But emptiness actually is the totality of things. It's the realm of totality, we call it. When nothing is missing. It's such a fullness, such completeness, that it is called empty of any self-separation, self-involvement. So to assert the emptiness of things is to miss its reality. If I sit here and I go into some sort of state and you're not there, then something's missing. When the heart rests in the inner stillness, what appears outside as grievance, aggression, or suffering is just arising from within our own mind. It's not the reality of what's out there. So to deny the reality is to miss the reality. To assert the emptiness of things is to miss the reality. Having no preferences and no opinions doesn't mean we stop loving. But we can stop talking about it. We can stop ruminating, worrying And we can also have some control over our habits, the way we communicate, the way we share our lives. One teacher put it this way: thinking is a sense phenomenon. We have preferences and opinions, but in this verse they are not obscuring reality. And we are capable of being the mindful of the mind itself, or mindful of the heart, its motions, its feelings, but not entangled in them. Still we can be dismissive of our own respective inner lives regarding challenges that come with being human beings. If you wish to move in the one way, do not dislike even the world of senses. It's an enlightened poem on how not to get caught up in the objections and objectifications. It's the world of our senses and engaging in them fully, beyond the duality of wanting and not wanting, liking and not wanting and liking. The poem is about liberation from a dualistic perspective on seeing the world and ourself as separate. There's little there's a little verse here: to come directly into the harmony, to come directly into harmony with this reality is simply to say, when in doubt, not to. In this not to, nothing is separate and nothing is excluded. Again, this is the level of equanimity. It moves into a little epigraph called saying, I don't live in the outer entanglements or attachments. Or again, I think I said this, nor in the inner feelings of emptiness. They sort of go together, really. When we have an attachment, or we have... Well, there we go. We're all on the road somewhere. When we have an attachment, there is also a sense of an emptiness. There's longing. We haven't quite got there. We have a longing. We're wanting. We're trying to get something. And in that there is quite an empty feeling. And this is not the big emptiness of awakened emptiness. This is the small feeling we're lacking in some way. We don't have something. Chinese master, the famous master, Mao Tzu, responded when asked, what is mind? He said, mind is Buddha. The mind is Buddha. To attain not two and not one is to attain the level of faith that the author of this poem was able to write. Trust in faith, or trust in mind. There's a little poem I'll end with here. It's called Asan's Rooster. Asan was a laywoman in the 18th century in Japan, and she studied with a Zen master, Tetsumamon. And she was unremitting in her devotion to practice. She was a very devout practicer. Often devout and devotional practice is in the Pure Land faith, where you have a deity or the Buddha, and you pray to that deity and Buddha for liberation. And for some, it's to be liberated in the Pure Land or in a pure heaven. And she was a practicer of this. And another thing about this poem, it was actually written in a response or in a way to go beyond just that faith, more doctrinal, dogmatic faith, that you can get something if you pray to this, or you can get something if you attend a teacher and do a lot of good practices. It was against that. It was turning us back into a direct response within ourselves to enter, hopefully, quite spontaneously, but into this state, a moment of experience where you do not experience that duality. And so she has this experience. One day during her morning sitting, she heard the crow of a rooster, and her mind suddenly opened. She spoke a verse in response. The fields, the mountains, the flowers, and my body too are the voice of the birds. What is left that can be said to hear? So what is left to hear? That one crow, that moment of one particular crow, took her back into that great way where there were no distinctions, no preferences, no clinging, no judging, no turning away from. It entered her straight in to the heart of the matter, the truth of the matter. So it's a little bit of a doctrinal talk, I guess, in some ways, but it's a wonderful teaching, and it's a teaching that I go back to often. But I can see, as I'm getting older, there is a thread from way back when I was in my 20s and first reading it. There is this thread of experiences, you might say, thread of wisdom and compassion arising that relate to this poem for me. I can speak on many instances, and I will talk through some of those, but I want to use the time in this course where we have a meditation to see the verses we're talking about, how we experience those in our meditation. To have a period of time to actually unpack each word, each line, and see where we have difficulties or we have a deep understanding of that. Often we skim. Do you notice when you read, you skim? We're trying to find very fast ways. There's actually books now. You can get the whole book in 15 minutes because someone summarized the whole book. But in that 15 minutes, you might actually lose what you would experience from reading the book yourself, in the sense of the moments of wisdom that fly off the page that relate to you. So it's not about trying to get a full understanding of these words. It is more about, from a meditative place, having an experience that takes us into or inward, where we can trust fully ourselves at any moment. We can trust our heart, our mind is experiencing what it needs to experience in life. And what it will take into the next moment that will continue to open the experience of life. That's what we're living for. That's what we're here for. So thank you for living, Thank you for living. That's wonderful. Thank you for being here. And yes, I think there's time for a few questions. I don't know.
Thank you, Venerable. Yeah, we've got some time. First question from the floor, maybe?
It might take a moment to freeze, unfreeze the mind. Questions always have us relating a little bit more to one another.
Hi, thank you very much for the talk. That was very interesting. I do have a question. I guess, what would you obviously, the teachings you're talking about in this case, they come from a poem. And I guess, look, I just wondering what role you see actually poetry as actually, I guess, playing within schools of Buddhism, maybe a bit your school or maybe other schools of Buddhism. I guess the reason why I ask is because, you know, I've read mantras, I've heard of suttas, I've heard of teachings, I guess, but I haven't really, I guess, so far I'm not familiar with too much Buddhist poetry, and I guess I'm just thought I'd ask, what role do you see that as playing?
Well, Buddhist poetry is, everything was in verse. It was originally chanted.
Yeah.
Everything from Buddhism is really poetry in a way. It was in verse. In the Tibetan tradition, it's full of verse, full of poetry. You know, we might read it as a text because it in translation it may not have that sort of poetical sense to it. But actually originally this did have very clear poetical stanzas, you know, in its original Chinese language. And most Chinese teachings, everything, even now in Korea, you know, when you have the formal Dharma talk, the first introduction is a poem. So all through Asia, I know poetry's part of the teaching, but I think it's part of all of Buddhism. You know, if you go back into the Therigattas, they're all poems. You go back into the verses of the nuns, they're poems. So you don't go very far from, because they're succinct. You know, you're trying to get to a truth in a very succinct way, in a very clear way. So again, it's something to point directly to your heart or to manifest directly within your heart. You know, we have this Zen teaching which is more pointing to the heart of the matter. From this teaching, it is actually becoming the heart of the matter. So to do that, you need some sort of poetry of verse to take the mind there. You know, in modern day verses, you know, you have a lot of great poets who I often quote, you know, other poets' poetry, because I think, again, they speak, you might say, in a modern-day Buddhist language. They bring Buddhism into nature, into the nature of the world that we live in, and experienced in the moment. You know, haiku, a Japanese form of poetry, where they have, you know, only three lines, supposedly three words, 4 words, and 3 words, 5 words, and 4 words. You know, this very succinct way of getting a message is always very much like an enlightenment experience. And often it has something that takes you there, the sound of the wood being split, or the sound of, you know, the footprint, your feet moving on the ground or something. Or it might have, you know, so it's using the senses in this way, in the case sound of Avalokiteshvara, you know, hearing all the cries of the world in that one moment, is another line that's encapsulated in this sort of epigraph way. You know, how can you hear all the cries of the world, all the suffering of the world? It's not how do you feel it, how do you experience it, how do you hear it? So have a look at that. It's good.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. There's one just behind. Oh, and one.
Let's take one online.
Yeah.
Question from online. Stories can convey meaning. I sometimes view my life as a story, and it gives my life meaning. Is there a way to find meaning in a life in a different way?
Well, life is about, I think my talk has really touched on this, how to live a way that you come to a deep realization, a deep truth, is how to really find the greatest meaning, how to be liberated. Experiencing liberation is the greatest meaning on how to live, because it shows us what is really very important fundamentally. Everything becomes alive and becomes, a truth. Coming back to that word, why truth is so important, or truth or faith, or believing in is so important. It's because these are fundamental to all of us. It's not a separate, I have this truth, I own this truth. No. The Buddhist truth is a truth. You can enter it in any number of ways, but you will have the same understanding of that when you experience it at that level, when you understand it fully. So you might come to a great intellectual understanding, you might come to a great succinct poetical understanding, but actually a truth is alive beyond just the academic literary way of thinking and learning, is alive when it is in action, in this present moment action. That's when truth is revealed. So that's why in the Zen tradition, something that cracks open that moment, something that takes you completely, clears the mind completely, and there's no separation, then that will reveal the truth of that moment. It's not something you can know. It's not something you'll learn out of a book. It's something that you come to realize. Yes, one go.
Thank you, Venerable. Nice to meet you today. So I have a question regarding the toxic situation or people. So how to handle toxic situation or people when you cannot avoid them or that particular situation completely?
Well, you can only really handle the toxic situation of people which through your own mind. If your own mind holds on to the negativity, to the aversion, to the anger of your experience in relationship to others, then you have to do a couple of things. One is you have to either separate yourself. Not all people are toxic, and toxic people aren't always toxic. They have toxic moments. They say or do something that offends you in that moment. But this poem is telling us, the offense itself is not the problem. What we do with it is the problem. How we react to it. We usually react to it with aversion. We usually react to it with fear. So there's no trust going on. Trusting that in that moment, it's like looking at somebody like the President of America. It's very hard to rationalize what's going on here. It's an interesting thing how power can play such. But if we always react to it with tremendous aversion and anger, the one who gets hurt is ourselves. If we learn to try and have a very big mind around this and say, well, this is happening at this place at this time, if you can't find a way in yourself to make some differentiations here, something that improves your state of mind in relation to it, then you have to separate.
Thank you.
And work with what you can work with. Yes.
Question online. In Buddhism, we know kusala, wholesome, and akusala, unwholesome. What if one person is giving dana, but the person who received the dana doesn't feel...
I can't understand what you're saying. Sorry. Well, wholesome and unwholesome, I heard that.
Yeah, so, and then what if one person is giving dana, but...
Giving what?
Dana.
Dana?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But the person who received the dana doesn't feel happy because it's given without respect.
Ah.
That makes sense.
Well, that's the problem with the person who is receiving the Dhamma. It's not in the gift. And now, the Buddha talked very clearly on this too. You know, you don't have to receive the gift of the giver if it is not, you know, given with respect or with, you know, a good heart. But also, as the person who's giving the dana, the act ends in the giving. So you give the dana out of respect and kindness. How they receive it, you know. A lot of people bring dana here, and monks might eat this and not eat that, you know, all picking and choosing as we go along the line. I used to try and put a little bit of everything in my bowl, which made me my stomach very upset. But, you know, I'd think, well, I'm only coming once a month or so. I can bear it. I don't know how you do it every day. So when I went, after some time, I noticed the monks and nuns were taking food that would work for their system. It wasn't that they were rejecting all the rest of the food. They give blessings for it and show appreciations for it. But when we offer something, we can only offer it in our, you know, good heart. If the monk doesn't like it, then that may not suit him or her. You know, that is their issue. The act is done in the doing and the giving. The act of receiving, what we receive and take in, is part of our own mindset around that. If it's not received in kindness, then there's a bit of work to be done on that level of trusting in one's heart. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you again, Chikwan. Sorry, I was a bit late, so just getting back to the poem, I was just wondering, was it Korean, was it Chinese?
No, it's Chinese, so
Chinese?
you might have missed that.
And is there an author and a date?
I did share that. So the author was a man by the name, or he became a monk, by the name of Sheng Ts'an. And Sheng Ts'an, he became, after he had this sort of meeting of this second patriarch and became enlightened, he and the teacher went away, lived in the mountains for a couple of years, and then the teacher went his way, and Sheng Ts'an stayed on in the mountain for 24 years. And he is not known to have written other material, or given a lot of Dharma talks, but he did meet the next, who became the fourth patriarch, and there is a lot, there's not a lot written about him, but there is various very, very well-known texts that respect what he did, yes.
And what year are we
We're talking about, so in the 6th century, 585, he met his teacher. And somewhere in that time he wrote this poem.
Fabulous, thank you.
Yeah.
Just for anyone interested, we did put a link to the poem in the YouTube, so you can also go back and click on that.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Last question online. Should a Buddhist confidently discuss future plans? I have heard monks and nuns say they will do this, build that, or travel here. How can anyone say that they will perform any future act?
Yes, so I mean, you know, even though we're talking here about these succinct moments, these very pure states, we are, as humans, always planning. Sometimes when we have too much freedom, you know, our plans are big, and monks can, you know, want to travel here and there. We always have to keep, I'm very conscious of traveling. I only travel for purpose, because the money to travel, you know, is dana money generally, or is money that is even, you know, what comes into the center gets replenished, because I receive gifts that come back into the center. But I'm very careful about, well, I don't get very much money, so, you know, very careful about any dana that is offered and where it goes. It always has a very clear purpose. Sometimes when we're not out there in the workforce earning in that way, we may feel an entitlement in robes to receive, or we may feel an entitlement to have freedom to plan and travel here and there. It needs to be, we need to be very conscious about the dana given, its purpose, and, you know, often they buy a ticket, so that's very clear. For a monk, they're not. But I do think spending a lot of time dreaming our life away is not so useful. A lot of time, you know, making plans somewhere else because this isn't working, or this is boring, or, you know, I only have a limited time, and monks sometimes only have a limited time to stay in a place, so they have to travel. And they travel to teach, to support their temples, to support their community monastic, especially for senior monks. So planning is a part of what we do. It's not how we do it, again, trusting in the heart, trusting in the mind to do the appropriate, you know, for everyone, everything that's related to that situation. We are connected to every single act that others are doing with us or objects are doing for us. So how are we going to act? How are we going to relate? You know, what's the purpose of travel? It has to have purpose.
Thank you, Venerable. So it's time for some announcements. But firstly, so if people are interested in the course that you're teaching online, how do they find out about it?
Okay, did you put a poster up, Langdon? Oh.
Okay, well,
I'll go and do a print then. I want it up because otherwise we've only got a week. It's starting next week. If we were starting a week later, we would have had a little time, but the committee wanted to start this next week. So the best way, there is one online, I believe. I'll try and get a poster in here. It's what you have to do is the poster says everything. It's very clear about how to enroll. And once you have enrolled and put in the dana, which is, I think it's $100 for $120 and $100 for concession. So it's not a big price for 6 weeks, and you get a lot out of this course. But it is just a token to try and help the centre. Then you email me, which the email is on there, and I will send you the material and the Zoom link to join. So the Zoom, it'll be one singular Zoom link that will do for the whole 6 weeks. Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Okay, sure.
Oh, can you? Yeah.
Okay.
That'd be great. Thanks. Thank you, Langdon. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, great.
So, and let's just continue on with that theme just for a moment. We have at the back of the hall a box for donations. So those who have the capacity, please consider donating for Venerable's travel time and her other expenses. Okay, so the general announcements. We have our Ajahn Brahmali retreat. So the registrations, this runs from the 17th of April, which is the Thursday night before Good Friday, just to put into the Easter context. So it's a 7-day retreat, so 17th to the 24th of April, and the registrations for those is now open. Excuse me. Okay. Just a note in regard to the need for volunteer caretakers. One of the obvious side effects or sort of opportunities arising from the retreat centre is that we need people who might be interested and spend some time up there as volunteer caretakers. So the residential roles up there offer free accommodation and board in exchange for a number of hours work each week, somewhere in the order of 20 to 25. Today, it's a hot day. For those of you who can still manage it, however, we have a Kalyana Mitta cleaning day. So those who are able to stay and do some work will start around about 12:30. Now, just to change, this weekend, a number of people up at the centre in Newbury moving things around. So coming next Tuesday morning, the lunch dana offerings will now take place in the retreat centre. So the dana offerings have moved from what have now finally seems to become the nuns' quarters and will move across to the retreat centre. So the committee would like to thank all of those who've been working on this transition plan over the last few months, and the move over the last few weeks. It seems like it's finally got there. Now, in regard to our teaching program, tomorrow night, Ajahn Sadhara will do Monday night meditation. The Tuesday night meditation, Sandeep is breaking, but Srijit, I think, will be leading the meditation tomorrow night, but that's a silent meditation, largely. We have Make Meditation a Healthy Habit, Monday to Friday nights at 7 p.m. Melbourne time. It's 20-minute monastic-led twice a week. And then New Day, New Mind, for those of you who can get up any time early, you can start at 4 a.m. if you're super keen, 4:30 to 6:30. And then next week, the Sunday morning teaching will be Bhante Chittagutta Mahathera, who's an Indonesian bhikkhu. So the talk will be translated. And didn't manage to print out my promo for him. Oh, yeah, yes, I have, in smaller writing. So he's a senior bhikkhu, comes from Western Lombok. He's currently the head of foreign affairs for the Indonesian Theravada Buddhist Association. And he's also a Dharma teacher at the Buddhist University in Kertajutta, I think. It looks like Batu in Java. So Bhante will be here next week. And Monday night will be Ajahn Sadhara taking the Monday night. And that's it for the announcements. So I'll pass back to Venerable just to formally close the talk for this morning and to offer our respects.
Sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, everybody, and I wish you good health and keep cool today. So if you can stay back and help a little bit with the cleanup, that would be wonderful. And if you would like to come and join us for lunch, that would be wonderful.